So thank you everyone for joining us in the room and the 140 odd people I think we've got online as well. It's impressive. No pressure anyone who's speaking today. And thank you to Kavita for her opening remarks and to Rupert as well. And I mean, goodness, giving a speech like that off the top of your head, I wish I could. Maybe you should just not bother writing them, just do it off the top of your head. That's great. We're really fortunate to have 6 amazing panelists with us today to discuss the role that the digital space can play for people with deafblindness. I'd like to welcome our in-person panelists shortly. Actually, why don't you two come up now and I'll introduce you in a second. And then also we've got 4 people joining us online as well. So first up, I'm just going to do a few short intros. First up on my far left is Christopher Patnoe, who is the head of accessibility at Google. And Christopher is the brainchild of this amazing space that we're sat in today, those of us that are here. This is the Accessibility Discovery Centre, and this was Christopher's brainchild. And, you know, it's, those of us that have been here have already seen what a wonderful space it is. And I think it's testament to Christopher's vision in this space. So thank you. And I should just say, Christopher leads on Google's accessibility around product, policy and partnerships across EMEA. Correct? Good stuff. And secondly, next to me is Amy Whalley, who is head of strategy from the Valuable 500. Amy leads on the development and management of relationships with Valuable 500 companies, as well as potential future members within EMEA. Amy's worked within the field of disability inclusion throughout her career in both the UK and Australia. But thank you both for joining us up here in person. And we also have 4 panelists online who are joining us from Croatia, Uganda and Romania. So if everyone is able to turn their cameras on, who are joining us online. First up is Dr. Sanja Tarczay, President of the World Federation of the Deafblind, a global non-governmental advocacy organisation by and for persons with deafblindness, aiming to improve the quality of life and protect and advance the rights of people with deafblindness. Next is Atelka Secondi, Director of Sense International Romania, an expert in programs and advocacy in the disability and development sector. Etty has been involved in the world of deafblindness for the past 18 years when she first joined Sense International Romania, and in 2017 she took on the position of Director. And alongside Etty is Oana, a psychologist and a special education teacher working with children with visual impairments. 3 years ago, she joined forces with Sense International Romania as an active member of the group of young people with deafblindness. And she, alongside other members of the group, are now working to set up an association of people with deafblindness in Romania. And finally, Edward Otim, Regional Director for Sense International in East Africa, with over 16 years work experience in the design, management and implementation of multi-sectoral programs across different cultural backgrounds. Welcome to everybody and thank you all for joining us. Now, the aim of this panel is to answer the big question. The digital space is a powerful place to connect and learn. And how can we make sure no one is left behind? But just before we get into that, I want to sort of repeat and expand on some of the stats that we heard earlier and that Kavita was mentioning. Some of these are quite shocking. People with a disability are 35% less likely to have essential digital skills for life. Only 1 in 5 children with deafblindness are enrolled in primary school and are 10 times less likely to be employed than their peers. And whether or not a disabled person is able to participate in society is highly dependent on their physical environment and the accessibility of the resources, equipment or technology on offer. So I want to get us going. I'm going to start this panel off by asking Oana and Christopher first of all. Digital learning is critical for everyone in this day and age to build our knowledge and skills and know more about the world around and beyond us. And I want to ask Oana this question first of all, before I throw it open to Christopher. And that question is, how has digital learning and access to digital information made a difference in your life?
Hello everyone. Mă bucur foarte mult să fiu astăzi aici și sunt recunoscătoare pentru asta.
I am really happy to be here today and I am grateful to be here.
Iar din perspectiva surdocecității,
and from the perspective of a person with deafblindness,
accesibilizarea pentru a ajunge, cumva, accesibilizarea m-a ajutat foarte mult în procesul ăsta de a deveni profesor.
having accessible information, digital information, helped me a lot on my journey to become a teacher.
Majoritatea examenelor le-am dat învățând în modul ăsta.
Most of my exams I was able to pass by learning digitally.
Nu m-am oprit aici și cumva datorită tehnologiei m-am îndreptat spre dezvoltarea personală și spre dezvoltarea emoțională.
I didn't stop there. Also using digital learning, I went towards professional development, emotional development.
Și astfel am făcut studii pentru a deveni psihoterapeut.
So I went to university to become a psychotherapist.
Dacă mă gândesc acum, dacă m-aș cunoscut cu 20 de ani mai devreme,
I'm thinking now, had I been born 20 years earlier,
poate că nu aș fi avut posibilitatea să ajung până aici.
maybe I wouldn't have been able to reach this far.
Pentru că aparatele auditive nu ar fi fost accesibile sau n-ar fi fost atunci,
Because maybe hearing aids wouldn't have existed or wouldn't have been accessible,
cel puțin nu în România.
at least not in Romania.
Iar tot datorită tehnologizării și dezvoltării,
And also due to technology and digital learning,
cumva ne-am format mai mulți tineri
there is a group of us, of young people,
în care ne dorim foarte mult să înființăm o asociație a persoanelor cu surdocecitate în România,
who really want to come together and establish an association of people with deafblindness in Romania.
pentru că există o asociație a nevăzătorilor și una a surzilor, dar nu există o asociație a persoanelor cu surdocecitate.
Because there is an organization of people who are blind, there is an organization of people who are deaf, but there isn't one for people who are deafblind.
Și astfel că, datorită cumva modului mai ușor de a comunica unii cu alții și pentru că tehnologia a făcut astfel încât fiecare dintre noi să se dezvolte,
And because now communication has become so much easier thanks to technology, we are able to come together more easily.
astfel acum putem să facem și noi lucrurile pentru noi.
Now we can do things for ourselves.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much.
Right.
Christopher, I want to pass that on to you. How has access to digital information and learning made a difference to your life?
I'm one of these people who didn't realize my personal connection to disability until I was older. It wasn't until my mid-40s that I realized that I'm dyslexic. I just thought I was rubbish at spelling and processing information. It didn't occur to me that dyslexia is what I was experiencing. When I was growing up, I was told the word will spin or other kind of strange things that you're told on Saturday morning cartoons. So my connection it came by accident. My connection to the work came because my product wasn't accessible. So it's been this adventure of discovery and curiosity that allows me to learn what's broken, learn what's possible, because we bring the community together. So this learning process has to be constant. You need to stay hungry, curious, humble, because what we have today may not be good enough tomorrow. What we have today isn't good enough, frankly. It's a whole lot better than what was existing before we were here. So my connection to the work, my connection to the effort is one of personal interest, professional interest, and a passion for helping humanity.
Wonderful. So I want to bring Sanja in at this point. Sanja, you lead the World Federation of the Deafblind. From your experience, how has digital exclusion impacted people with deafblindness in their life and their work? And how do we bridge this divide for people with disabilities?
Thank you. First of all, I want to sincerely thank you for welcoming me today, and I'm truly happy to see us collaborate. So regarding WFDB, last year we published the second global report, which has some parts regarding the assistive technology. So to be brief, we came up with a couple of key things. So the deafblind persons in today's world are really have limited access to technology, and we are really behind, let's say it. So the first thing, each deafblind right isn't being respected. Each individual has its right to choose the assistive device that he wants to use, but that's not the practice. That's the main problem. The other thing, we are getting the possibility of assistive technology, but many governments and many leading countries aren't recognizing the deafblindness as distinct disabilities, and they don't want to recognize our specific needs for the specific assistive devices we need. For example, from my personal experience, I use Apple and MacBook. But in my government doesn't recognize those devices as assistive technology for the deafblind users and deafblind population. The other thing is that the deafblind persons don't have the right to don't have the access to information. They don't know that technology is progressively growing and moving, and they don't know which new devices are there on the market. This could be done. The first thing that should be done is to recognize deafblindness as a distinct disability and the distinct needs that we have. If we want to succeed in having these conditions, we have to secure the professionals who will teach us how to use this technology. But now there is one big problem: communication. How will those professionals teach us if they don't know sign language or other communication systems deafblind persons are using? So those are a couple of key things that we come up in this second global report. But everything's not so dark. I'm always happy to hear that many organizations are establishing, for example, as I hear in Romania, there will be establishment of the deafblind organization, because the organization of deafblind persons, if we work together with the other organizations like, for example, SENSE, we can cross those barriers and we can advocate together more efficiently. Deafblind persons can and have to put their perspectives, and we have to listen to the deafblind's needs in order to get the rights that we deserve. So my point being, every deafblind individual has to be involved in every work that we are advocating for the deafblind rights. So in brief, That would be all.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. So, Christopher, a big question for you. How can we ensure the digital world is more inclusive for people, not just with deafblindness, people with all disabilities? And what good practices are you seeing here at Google?
So to what we were just hearing, I think having it be disability-led is one of the key issues that is often not taken into account. Only someone who is deafblind can tell you what it's like to be deafblind. Only someone who's deafblind can tell you what tool is helpful for them, or if you provide a tool for them, where does it fall short? So again, coming back to that humility and curiosity, we have, as we create technology, you have to take these considerations in mind, and it has to be done in concert with the community. But then we also need to realize, if you talk with one deafblind person, you talk to one deafblind person, that the experience of humanity is very, very broad. So you also need to talk with more than one person and then create an opportunity to provide feedback. So for not to do any kind of sales pitch, but we have, here at Google, we have free support for people with disabilities for most of our products. You go to g.co/disability support, and we have chat, email, Be My Eyes, and email support. So if you don't know this, it can't help you. And if you don't know this, we can't learn how to make our products better, because this team has a direct pipeline into our engineering organizations. So how do you make these things better is by listening, collaborating, and listening to the experts. And this is true of deafblindness or autism or blindness or communication challenges. Every aspect of someone's needs are different. So as we create our products better, they end up becoming better for more and more.
And I want to bring in Amy here from Valuable 500. I mean, listening to Christopher there talking about kind of best practices, is that something that resonates with you? I mean, are we seeing change across business, and does more need to be done, do you think?
Yeah, yes and yes. So certainly the positivity is that definitely more is happening, and organisations are understanding the business imperative of disability inclusion, and inclusion in that is making sure that their products, their information is accessible, which is so much in this world now on digital online access. So certainly across the organisations that we work with at Valuable 500, their ambitions to make sure that their design with accessibility is part of that process is really evident. And it's also transcending not only from a customer perspective, but then equally from an employee perspective. And following on from what Christopher mentioned there, the role that disabled talent and people with disability play in designing those environments or testing those environments to ensure it is meeting the needs, as I say, of both their customers and their employees. And then equally, yes, there is still very much more to be done. And I think examples such as the Resource Hub that we're launching today, and organisations like Google providing information and sharing information, the collective power of business to want to help all organisations really make progress as it relates to the digital environment and their world as a whole is key for us to continue to push the dial and ensure that no one's getting left behind.
And I think that that's one of the most inspiring things about the accessibility space is the really collegiate nature of it, and that willingness to share and to make things better for everybody. So bringing a couple more of our online panelists here. So Etty and Edward, you see the realities of exclusion for people with deafblindness in your day-to-day work. And I want to ask Edward, first of all, how does an initiative like the Global Resource Hub move the needle towards better digital inclusion of people with deafblindness in East Africa?
All right, thank you so much, Paul. It's really exciting, first of all, to be on this panel. I'll provide my insights more like in three perspectives. So trying to look at what we've been already doing, but also the kind of opportunities, that kind of work has already, done to the communities that we work in, but also trying to now focus on the linkages that the current work has to do with the Global Resource Hub that we're launching today. So as a region, we've basically been at the forefront of bridging technological gaps among people with deafblindness. across the 3 countries that we work in the region by implementing inclusive, technology solutions for learners with deafblindness. And we had this support from one of our very good friends, 2 of our very good friends from, one is based in Uganda, MTN Foundation, and then Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa. So the support that we received from the MTN Foundation, it supported us in establishing the ICT resource centers in about 10 primary and secondary schools across the country. And we were able to install, those computers with adapted assistive technologies, for example, the JAWS and Duxbury's. And then we also had to connect each of those computers to the internet, just to ensure that the children, deafblindness can access learning materials and digital resources for that matter. So this, initiative certainly has brought more equitable learning, but also improved the quality of the learning, environments where the children, live. With the support that we received from Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa, we feel we've been able to transform the learning, in the different schools by enabling students to shift from mechanical to digital technology. And in that matter, for example, we've reached close to 25 learning institutions, including, 12 primary schools, and then 12 secondary schools, and 1 university. So the technology is basically using an Orbit Reader 20 that replaces the use of, the mechanical pack-in spray machine. So we've had, with that kind of work that we've been able to do, we've learned quite key things in terms of transformation of learning from, mechanical to digital learning. So the first one is these resource centers that we've installed have really boosted the access to information. So we are talking about learners now being able to navigate and access online information. And then the Ministry of Education, together with the National Curriculum Development, recently introduced a curriculum that is more centered on the learner. So we feel these resource centers have helped to bridge that gap, especially in terms of access to information. But also the gap between the learners and the teachers has been closed, because we believe that, for example, the Braille users and the non-Braille users were initially finding it difficult, especially if it comes to marking of examinations. We needed to do transcription before, the results are marked. Before the papers are marked and results produced. So that's one great milestone. And then, of course, there's a witnessed high number of learners who are joining higher institutions of learning, and we believe this is all due to, improvement in performance by, those different learners. Now, in trying to create the linkage between the hub that we're launching today and already the work that has happened in the past, we believe the alignment, I will speak mainly about just 4 areas quickly. So the first one is around coverage and accessibility. The ICT resource centers already that are spread across the country, we think that this will provide access to technology for learners who may not afford personal devices, for example, like the use of phones and laptops. So this is really a great game changer. Although, of course, the hub that we're launching today mainly requires the use of internet. The support that we already gave to the schools, for example, the distribution of Orbit readers in the 25 learning institutions that I already talked about, we believe will offer an online alternative. So learners are able to download and store resources from the hub, and then ensuring continuity of access of information, even without internet connection. We have already contact persons in the different schools who can assist these learners in accessing and utilizing, offline materials using those Orbit reader gadgets. And then in terms of connectivity, already, like I mentioned, all the computers are equipped with stable internet. So we're just trying to ensure uninterrupted access to, the resource hub that we're launching today, and students, and together with the ICT support assistants at the different centers that are already established, will be sensitized, of course, how to effectively use the hub. And then in terms of sensitization and awareness, as was mentioned earlier, I think given the current scope that we're in, for example, in the region, the demand for this information is a lot. And I'm really happy to note that this is the first of its kind across the region. And we think that we will have to train the ICT Resource Center staff, for example, in the schools that we've already initiated, these kind of technologies to support the learners in accessing and navigating through the resource hub. But also we want to develop communication materials to promote awareness and encourage the usage within the schools, but also going beyond the community. And then finally, I think it's about the usage promotion. So using the 10 ICT resource centers that we've already established as access points for the resource hub that we're launching today, that will be more like the initial starting point. So we will have a lot of awareness materials that will be displayed at these centers to encourage adoption and ensure communities and the learners in those schools are informed about the hub's benefits. So I think that's all what I needed to provide for now. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Edward. That was fantastic. And I wonder if I can bring Etty in at this point, and whether you can give us an example or two from your experience of the power and the potential that the hub has for connecting people with deafblindness.
Yes, sure. I can talk about it. I was actually thinking about what Juana was saying earlier about 20 years ago and all how things have changed. And I'm thinking it's my 18th year in the world of deafblindness, working with Sense International, and just how much things have changed in these years. And I'm sure my colleagues from the other countries can agree with me. Now we are talking about things that probably, I don't know, 20 years ago would have sounded like science fiction. This hub and technology and digital learning has made a huge difference in the life of children with deafblindness, in the life of teachers, families. I'm thinking of a couple of products, so to speak, that we have developed and that are available on the hub. One of them, for instance, we have developed a software. It's called eSense, developed with financial support from Orange Foundation in Romania. And the idea was that teachers, in their work with small children, toddlers, who had visual or hearing impairments, they did not have a software that was specifically designed to be used by children with sensory impairments. There was an abundance of various games online, but they were not at all adapted and suitable for children who are deafblind, because everything was maybe too complex, maybe the background was too crowded, whereas what they needed was simple things that they can adjust and adapt to the needs of every individual child. So we developed this software, and it sort of changed the life of many teachers who are working in this area of sensory stimulation for children with deafblindness. This is one example. Another example I'm thinking about, a more recent one, because this one happened last year, was around developing resources for parents. Through the internet, through online communications, we were able to reach out to almost 100 parents of children with deafblindness, of babies. I'm talking about our early intervention program. And we asked them, the parents, what do you need? What kind of information would you have liked to have when you first learned about the diagnosis of your child? And we collected all of this information, and it's now all being published in a guide that is available on the Global Resource Hub. Another example may be quite relevant, especially nowadays. is a series of videos we developed for the online safety of children with deafblindness, sensory impairments, but I guess it's universal and it's advice that can be useful for any child that goes on the internet and sort of is many times at risk of abuse, of economic abuse, of many dangers that are out there in the online. So we touched on this element of safeguarding and safety for children using the internet as well. So these are just a few examples of the kind of work that is so relevant in the area of digital learning and deafblindness. These three things can be in the same sentence.
Wonderful, thank you. And I just wonder whether, Oana, whether you'd like to add perhaps your experiences of this as well.
Dacă vrei să adaugi tu din experiența ta. Legat de hub.
Mie mi-au plăcut foarte mult clipurile cu poveștile de viață încărcate pe platformă.
I very much liked the video clips on the hub that contain the life stories.
Și cu modul în care văd realitatea sau viața persoanei surdocicitate.
And the way in which people with deafblindness see life and reality.
Pentru că asta e o modalitate de a da seama cumva că poveștile oarecum sunt universale.
Because you can realize somehow that these stories are universal.
Și că sunt persoane și în celelalte țări care au dizabilitate exact ca tine.
And that there can be people in other countries with a disability just like yours.
Și cu toate astea merg înainte.
But despite this, they go ahead, they move forward.
Și ăsta e un mod cumva prin care e transmisă o informație în mod universal, va ajunge la toată lumea.
And this is a way of relaying information, universally. It will reach everyone.
Pentru că ești acolo și intri pe platformă și poți să te conectezi, poți să afli și despre alte persoane care sunt ca tine.
Because it's just there. You can go onto the hub and find people who are in a similar situation like you are.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Finally, I'm going to put this to Amy, Christopher, and to Sanja. How can you support and promote digital platforms like the Global Resource Hub that champion learning and inclusion for people with disabilities? Amy, I'm going to kick it to you first.
Yeah, fabulous, thank you. So there's some principles I often sort of are guided by when it comes to disability inclusion, and that is to never assume, always ask the person, and the person's experience of disability is as unique as their fingerprint. And I say that because we may not know who needs the resource hub now or tomorrow or in 10 years' time. And so we all have a role, particularly business has a role, to make sure they can direct people to where those resources are, should they need it and when they may need it. And so I think, information is key, and we've had some examples here today about being able to connect, being able to collaborate, and to know where to find the support for individuals, for family members, for educators, and for business, I think is the critical piece. And so I think everyone has a role, as I say, particularly business, and certainly Valuable 500, very much the lead in this, is making sure that people know where they can go to find that information, and not assuming you know who needs it, but making sure that it's in our back pockets, or we always point to it, so that more and more people can have access to what they need.
Christopher, I mean, how do we do it? How do we get the word out there? How do we spread the gospel, so to speak? Is it through spaces like this? How do we do that?
You can Google it. Sorry, that was just too easy. The real challenge, and this isn't just going to be a challenge for the Disability Hub, is the awareness of the tools that can help you today. Spaces like here in the ADC can tell you about the things that are on your phone, the things that are on your web browser that you may not know that can be helpful. The same thing will be true about the hub. So I think one of the first things you need to do is use it, provide feedback, because it's never going to be perfect. No technology is ever perfect. So use this, provide feedback, engage with the community, and then share with people outside of yourself. You don't need to be a social influencer to be able to be impactful. You need to find people who can help. You need to find people who care. And together you get to create the momentum that can make visibility and awareness something that's real. But it takes intention and it takes involvement. We can't take it for granted. You can't put an ad up and expect it to work, even on Google or Bing, to be more fair. You need to be involved personally, and you need to show that commitment, and you need to bring people with you.
Brilliant. And Sanja, lastly, I mean, how can you support and promote digital platforms like the Global Resource Hub?
Thank you. The thing that I would like to say with this research hub and regarding the Sense International, I mean, I was involved in activities of Sense International from 30 years ago. And I for sure can say that Sense International makes qualitative activities and has amazing outcomes. The Sense International have many professionals who are helping deafblind persons and facilitate their life. As well, as we already heard, it is very, very hard to get just one perspective. For example, if we ask the same question to the two different deafblind individuals, we will get two different feedback. There are many various types of deafblindness. And because of that, it's mandatory that the organization of the deafblind persons were actively involved with the activities from Sense International. For example, I merged the WFDB with other organizations which helped us to grow and to help deafblind persons globally. It is very important to know that I want to emphasize that for the persons without disabilities, assistive technologies facilitate their lives, and for deafblind persons, technology does much more. It creates possibilities, it opens new doors, and it creates new ways of inclusion, better inclusion. And because of that, I'm very happy to see, and I strive to see the Global Research Hub develop and to see the Global Research Hub work. We can't forget that the deafblind person, if we want to get complete inclusion, the technology isn't the key. The key is human assistance, whether that would be guide interpreter, personal assistant, or deafblind interpreter. But with technology and professionals and, of course, live assistance, that makes our life more easy and perfect. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. So that was all of the questions that we had. We've had some questions come in from people watching online as well. So this is my favourite bit. This is where I get to put people on the spot now. So Amy, first question is coming for you, and it says, if you were to ask businesses to do one thing to make workplaces more accessible, what would it be?
Gosh, that's
No
one.
pressure.
Yeah, that is a big one. So I'll give one, but I've probably got three at least. To be honest, I think the most important thing that business can start with is conversations. So if you think about the personal experience an employee could have within their environment of working, having confident conversations with their manager about what they may or may not need to thrive within the business. And so the open-mindedness, the disability confidence to have conversations about what individuals need, adjustments, accommodations, really is critical for an inclusive workplace. And really that wouldn't be dissimilar when we flip it to the customer side and actually thinking about all of your customers, designing with accessibility front and centre, and again communicating and talking with customers to understand what customers need to be able to thrive and use it.
I think it's that phrase, "nothing about us without us," as sort of applies to a lot of the things that we've been talking about. Christopher, how do people like Google bridge the digital divide between low resource and high resource settings? I guess it's quite an important question to ask when we're talking about different countries and different parts of the world.
I think an important thing to realize is what is invented in California may not work in a rural Ugandan setting. So one of the things we need to do is try to understand what's the difference. What is the technological landscape? What is the cultural landscape? What is the lingual landscape? All of these things matter because we might have great Wi-Fi here in London, but when I was in Mombasa, it wasn't great in comparison. We were in schools, and some schools had Wi-Fi, some schools didn't. So the deployment of tools depends upon the infrastructure that's there. And a company like Google, even with the vast resources we have, we can't provide Wi-Fi to every school in the world. So we need to understand, well, what's broken. It's a sort of inclusive design thing. You have to go talk to the community. You need to listen to the community to understand what the problems are and what the solutions are. And there's a few of them. One I mentioned is languages. There's 6,000 languages in the world. There's 1,000 languages in Africa. And most automatic speech recognizers, a couple hundred, 600 maybe. So there's a long ways to go in terms of making what we're seeing on the screen here, automatic captioning, real for a vast amount of the world. So the language aspect to that. There's also the technical aspect in terms of the devices. An Android device, despite all the iPhones I see in here, and you're loud, it's okay. The Android device is the most popular device in the world because of cost and the function. So we did some interesting research with AT-Scale and GDI Hub, trying to understand the impact of mobile devices as assistive technology in India, in Kenya, and in Brazil. We'll be sharing the resources of this in the next handful of weeks or months, where we found that if someone had a phone and training on how to use it, we had greater wellness, we had greater opportunities for education, independence, jobs. These things are real if you have the right technology and are taught how to use it. And we learned this by going into the community and asking. So I guess to wrap it all up, it is that humble conversation, to the point, but with places that aren't where you live. Bring the people in, learn together what needs to be fixed, and then together try to roll out solutions that can be improved over time.
Thank you. So this question is for Edward, and it's Sense International is not in all countries, for example, Malawi. With this shared knowledge that we've been talking about, how do we make sure people with deafblindness or those working with them continue to gain more knowledge?
All right, thank you so much. That's a good question indeed. So there are several ways. So previously, what we did was we had quite a number of physical, for example, physical resource hubs across the region, but because of several challenges in terms of access to those physical resource hubs, and I think that's why we now started thinking, can we make something digital? So to be direct, I think the creation of this global resource hub is one way of having people outside our current geographical scope, being able to access, this resource. But also in terms of extending, the kind of work that we've done within the region. I could give one example for Rwanda, for example, where we haven't had like our physical presence as a regional program. We've worked with the Rwanda Union of the Disabled, and basically trying to provide them support on inclusivity and how best to support people with deafblindness. But also, as I mentioned earlier, I think with the installation of the ICT resource hubs, of course installed with internet. That's the power of having internet. You can access resources from anywhere. But one thing I wanted to emphasize, the beauty with this hub, it is actually targeted to the user. So you be rest assured that all the information that you find within the global Deafblind Resource Hub is information targeted to people with deafblindness, but also, for example, those who support them. So that's the beauty with it. And I think, yeah, like having gadgets, installed with connectivity will be one way of people, from different locations being able to access, this different information. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. And Edward, I have a follow-up here. I mean, the first part of this, I think you've addressed, but the second part I think might be interesting, and it asks, can you shed more light on how East Africa is developing information online and how people with deafblindness in East Africa can get involved?
Great, it's indeed a good question. So I must note that access to digital content has been a challenge, first of all, I think, within the region. And because of, I think, the paradigm shift from, this mechanical kind of technology to digital technology, but most of the content we rely on like companies who do, production of this digital content. But one of the things that we're looking at is for the schools that we've so far established, the 10 schools within, like in Uganda, for example, we are looking at having to establish like more centers of digital content creation within those different schools, but also in terms of spreading on who accesses that information. We will initially use those schools as avenues where the other, like schools across the country and the region can be able to initially tap and access that content from. So it's really more like work in progress, but issues of digital access, especially braille digital content access is still a challenge.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Maybe just to add something to this. Some of the tools that exist today can be helpful in bringing digital content. Android as a device has the ability to create captions from audio streams that come to your phone. Chrome browser, as I showed some folks earlier today, has the ability to take content and provide captions for screen, but also piping it into a refreshing braille display. So you can be deafblind and be able to watch a video or read the captions that's there. So these tools exist now, and we'll be working and collaborating with Sense International to make sure that these features are added to the hub so that other people can learn from this. Because the goal is awareness, the goal is empowerment. That's it.
And our last question, I think it's the last one we've probably got time for, is to Eti and Oana. And the question is, how can we get more people with deafblindness to become more vocal in their demands for accessibility?
Fie mai vocale în a obține tehnologia asistivă. Și
Să răspund eu? Da. Okay. Păi, primul pas, după mine, cred că a fost făcut.
I think that the first step has already taken place.
Fiindcă pentru dezvoltarea platformei,
because for the development of this hub,
am fost întrebat, eu și colegii mei,
we were asked, we were consulted, me and my colleagues,
cât de accesibilă e platforma pentru noi.
On how accessible this hub is to us.
Și atunci, fiindcă am ajuns aici, avem accesul la informația asta și știm că pe viitor putem să ne îndreptăm înspre asta.
And because we reached this point and we know that from now on we can go to this resource hub for further information,
O să ne îndreptăm atenția din ce în ce mai mult asupra tocmai a modului în care putem să ne dăm seama care platforme sunt mai accesibile sau să împărtășim unii cu alții, cel puțin platforma care există deja.
we will share among the group and with other people with deafblindness that this hub exists, but we will also look at different hubs to see how accessible they are or not.
Iar pe viitor, ca și asociație,
And for the future, as an organization of people with deafblindness,
ne gândim să ne îndreptăm atenția tocmai spre asta, fiindcă
this is where we want to be heading. This is what we want to move towards.
Dacă stau să mă gândesc, ăsta e viitorul și ăsta e un mod prin care noi putem avea acces la informație foarte rapid.
Because if you come to think of it, this is the future, and this is the way to access information quickly.
Bineînțeles, cum spuneau și colegii mei, împreună cu o asistență umană sau cu cineva care să fie acolo și să ne ajute.
But as my colleague said earlier, this cannot be done without a human touch, without the human assistance, someone there to support through the whole process.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to see if there's any questions in the room. Thank you everyone online for their questions. Does anyone in the room have any questions they'd like to ask? Oh, don't be shy. So, okay, well, we'll wrap it up there then in that case. If we can have a round of applause for all of our wonderful panel. It's been a fantastic conversation, I'm sure everyone will agree. And Kavita, if you'd like to come back up and thank you.
That was an incredible panel discussion. Thank you to the panelists for some really thought-provoking conversations. I think for me, my reflections on that was, in a way, it did tell the story of the hub and why we are launching it today, why we are here. Especially with Oana saying how digital learning helped with her becoming a teacher, and now she's looking at forming an association of people with deafblindness. And just talking about the video clips of other people with deafblindness from other countries and how it was great for her to see that. I think that really, for me, encapsulates the journey of the hub and the purpose of the hub. I think there were a few things worth mentioning. Edward talking about the shift from analog ways, from the Perkins Braille machine to a more digital Orbit reader. I think what we're trying to do with the hub and creating more digital access to information and resources fits well with that shift that we're seeing. And Sanja talking about how people with deafblindness are actually still being left behind from digital information and resources, and how the hub could be a way of creating possibility, opening new doors and finding new ways of including them. I think for me, the two key things, though, in terms of messages and takeaway is this has to be led by people with disabilities and owned by people with disabilities. Oh, I'm not talking about going and perhaps auditing other hubs and seeing how they are inclusive and accessible. I love the idea. It's not just about us. And we must ensure that all content and resources and hubs out there are accessible. And just to touch on what Chris said about collaborating, listening, Amy talked about conversations. I think there is a lot of co-creation, collaboration between users and organizations like us, tech giants like yourselves, industry colleagues like yourselves. I think there is a greater need for collaboration and partnership, and that's the only way we can move the needle, as we said. Yeah, I think the last thing I want to touch on was Amy's point about not assuming who needs it. I think, and that's a brilliant point, because I said this in my opening remarks about something becoming accessible for one, becoming accessible for many. So not assuming who may need it is I thought, a really important point. So thank you to the panelists really for a great discussion. I feel like we're leading the way today by creating this hub after listening to people with deafblindness. Oana said she was consulted and she's had input in the process. But what we want to do is we want to invite all of you today to join us on this journey. How do we change, digital spaces and make them more accessible for everyone, not just people with deafblindness? So we have 3 asks of you. I don't think you thought we'd let you go that easily. So one is promote the hub. Please share it with your partners, with your networks, and give us feedback. We want to learn. We want it to improve. As Chris said, nothing is ever static. We are trying to do the best we can and make it as inclusive and accessible. So the only way we can do that is if we hear from you and if you use it. The second is partner with us. We'd love to bring more information and resources on the hub. And Rupin, we've talked about this a lot, about having as much information as we can on the hub. So if you'd like to, partner with us, please do reach out and help us build something that's more comprehensive, more inclusive, more accessible for everyone. And lastly, I just want to, this is a real call to action, prioritize. Please prioritize disability, inclusion, and accessibility. And this is especially for governments and funders and other organizations working in the international development space. We heard the data, we heard the stats. It's 1.3 billion people out there who are being left behind, who could potentially be left behind if you're not including them. So please think about that and prioritize disability inclusion. I think with that, I'd like to close our event today. A very big thank you to all of you, especially everyone online as well. I know it's across the globe, different time zones, so thank you very much for joining us. The Nalombo Foundation, Rupin, without you, without the foundation, this would not have been possible. We would not be sat here today. The Christopher, the Google Accessibility Discovery Center, thank you for hosting us in this incredible space. And to your team, Dylan, Hans, we've bothered them for a week or more. So thank you very much for bearing with us and helping us with it all. Paul, thank you for taking time away from your leave. I'm blown away. Thank you, and hope you have a great holiday. But thank you to Paul and the panelists for some really, really thought-provoking discussions. And I'd like to thank our sister charity Sense UK, who've been with us on this journey right from the beginning and have been really integral to building the hub with us. So thank you to colleagues from there. And finally, my very, very brilliant Sense International team, both here in the UK and globally. It's your efforts that have brought us to where we are today. So thank you, and with that, thank you everyone for being here.
I didn't like the shit.